Quick question. Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. ThreatLocker implements a least privilege approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits and ensures protection for your organization 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you want to follow along in the show notes, securityweekly.com/PSW-855 is the show notes. We got lots of stories there that we're going to talk about. Do we want to start with cross-site scripting is ranked the #1 top threat of 2024 by MITRE and CISA?
It seems really weird that.
But I think it's just by numbers. Did I get that wrong? I was trying to figure out. It looks like it's just by counting numbers.
I mean, that's usually what you do with numbers is you count them.
Well, as opposed to like some interpretation of what the top threat, some other qualifying data of what the top threat is, other than what I believe they did was download all the CVEs that were published in 2024, then take the CWE identifier for those and just count.
Okay.
Right?
I mean,
like you could do that with an LLM in a little bit of time, and I've done similar kind of things with the CISA-KEV data, which is easier just a CSV, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so it just by counting, it was CWE 79, which is cross-site scripting, was 4,632 vulnerabilities caused.
Mm-hmm. Compared to second place, which was only 2,070 for
Correct.
CWE 89.
I don't like the way that it's phrased when it says the most dangerous software weakness, right?
Yeah, just because it's the most occurring doesn't mean it's the most dangerous.
Right?
You're jiving out, Bill.
Yep.
I'm with you.
Well,
also, some of my insights from looking at this data casually and having it in my talk presentation. Oh, was that this year? I don't remember. But anyway, WordPress. Someone wrote a blog post that I referenced in my presentation. I gave it B-Sides Charm. They looked at I think it was based on a year's worth of data, the CNAs, CV numbering authorities, that reported the most vulnerabilities. I don't remember if it was all time or just a year. But in any case, you would think like Microsoft would be, and they're up there.
Yeah.
But the top ones are companies that report vulnerabilities for WordPress plugins.
Yeah.
So it's like WordFence and another VulnDB or one of those other companies became CNAs. So you don't have to necessarily. This is what I learned in my interview. Below the Surface, go check it out. Alex Summers and Lisa Olson. Alec is the program lead for CVE at MITRE, and Lisa is the works at MSRC at Microsoft. She's the Patch Tuesday lead. So grateful that they were willing to sit down with me. This is amazing. But what Alec was, we were talking about CNAs, and he was like, you can be a security research company and still apply and become a CNA so that you can issue CVEs for stuff that you're finding. And that's what WordFence, and I want to say it's VulnDB, but I might get that wrong.
I think you're right.
Yeah, right. They issue the most CVEs. My theory is they're just looking at open source WordPress plugins. So because it's a WordPress plugin, anyone can go look at the PHP code so you can analyze it. They're written by folks that don't have a ton of development experience. It is the most popular web hosting platform, has a lot of software that people are writing for comparatively to other projects, right? And cross-site scripting is got to be pretty easy compared to other vulnerabilities to spot in PHP code.
For sure.
Right. If you wanted to train a model, you can say, point back to a ton of data. It's like, here's some PHP code, and there's where the cross-site scripting vulnerability is. Like, tuck that away, right? Learn from that. Now go look at this PHP code and find the things, right? Because it's all stuff that we know, right? We know what a cross-site scripting vulnerability looks like in PHP, so therefore we can use tools and go spot it. And they just issue CVEs for them. They don't have to contact the developer, because a developer of like one WordPress plugin probably not going to go through the trouble of go applying to be a CNA.
Right.
So they're issuing CVEs, oftentimes with not accurate data, is what I also found in my research, is that they will list, hey, this version of the WordPress plugin 15.1 and prior, all versions are vulnerable. But if you dig in, only version 14.9 and 15.1 are vulnerable. That vulnerability didn't exist in the other versions.
The functionality didn't exist.
Right, exactly. So
it looks like Lee's got a comment in here.
Yeah. So I mean, I was a little concerned with how this was phrased, because the core issue there, this input sanitization, is something that is not as pervasive as it's getting better. But it's not just that doesn't just get you cross-site scripting. That also gets you SQL injection, which is technically a separate beastie. And I was
could be
doing
command injection. I mean, input sanitization can relate to a lot of things.
I'm thinking, and there was one site that claimed it was in 2000. It was about it was in 2022. So it was saying 65% of websites were vulnerable to cross-site scripting, and 32% of government sites had SQLi risk. The numbers are crazy, but you add them together, it's not a pretty picture. And I would rather the emphasis be on, hey, sanitize your inputs regardless, because you can get they'll have your lunch if you don't.
Right. But
that's the sky is falling thing, not cross-site scripting or SQLi or command injection, I think. Maybe
I think it's also about like
focused on that.
What's the impact, like the global impact, for lack of a better term? So if someone writes a WordPress plugin and 200 people download it, but there's 17 cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in there, that's raising the numbers up.
Oh yeah, it's like artificially inflate the stat.
Is that really affecting the security of most things out there? Like, I think it skews you. For me, I'm almost like, you gotta exclude all of the WordPress vulnerabilities and then analyze the data. But that may not be. I mean, that's somewhat not fair either.
Well, that's why I'm stepping back to the bigger problem of sanitize your input, because let's not just focus on cross-site scripting. And you're right. The WordPress number is probably slanted. Although if your company depends on its WordPress site, if it's a vital thing to your survival, you might be tempted not to downplay the risk. But there's also mitigations we can do for a WordPress site, like software firewalls and other things that can mitigate.
Also, they're not a sponsor of the show, but I've used WP Engine for a long time.
Yep.
And
I've been trying to use it.
Yeah. I've been
and in fact, I just had someone said, "Oh, it's time I need to actually do a thing and set up a website." And I said, "WP Engine."
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. But I interacted with their support. One of my websites had like this huge spike in traffic. They reached out to me. They did a Zoom call with me. They're sending me logs. Like, they are on top of their game. And if you want to run WordPress, my recommendation is hands down WP Engine. I've used them for a long time. Love the company, the team. They knock it out of the park. There was a whole drama that they went through. And like, I even told the guy on the phone, I'm like, I don't know what that was all about. I'm like, you guys are great, right? Every time I got into support, they need to help me with something. They've been amazing. So speaking of, they applied like a nice, it's an awesome environment that security is top of mind for these folks. And if you're going to run WordPress, I would absolutely consider them.
And they can give you staging servers, and they can give you a hardware firewall,
the
and
features
other stuff.
And they can handle all your updates for you.
Yeah.
Man,
but
you guys
that still give you
WordPress.
enough rope to hang yourself.
Of course.
Yeah. So all my websites now are either built on GitHub or Firebase is where I'm building.
Nice.
Yeah. It like
Very
once
cool.
once you build your first site on GitHub, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so easy. Like, it can't be, they need to be static websites, but they're free. I mean, it's built on GitHub. It's awesome. Yeah.
I like that recommendation too, Bill.
Yeah.
Do you want to say Open Source Security Podcast covered this ranking by MITRE as well, and they had some different takes on it and explored different aspects of it. They actually went through the whole list. That's definitely worth a listen to get their insights. They called out, I forget which CWE they called out as. I think it was Josh who was saying when he had to actually assign a CWE to a CVE, he would do like hours of research and then just come back down to, I forget which one it is. I think it's the input sanitization one. There might be one generically for input sanitization that's kind of the catch-all.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But there are at least one that they were talking about that is a catch-all, which is interesting.
Well, so Paul, when and I don't know if you're ready to transition off of this one, but when I was reading through your stories, that's kind of what my feeling was it's probably just purely the amount of instances and occurrences and problems that we continue to have with cross-site scripting until I get to your story number 18, using a cross-site scripting vulnerability to get full admin access. Right. I think it is worth noting that. That and I'm sure that that it's probably split half and half with our listeners. Like so if you've been in the pen testing game, I don't know, maybe you're jaded or whatever. Like it's just another cross-site scripting or whatever. Or maybe you've seen that we can do a lot more with cross-site scripting than just popping up
a box,
right? Yeah. Like, and so I really liked your article number 18 where where it looks like Hamiz went through.
Did a great job. Yep.
Did an excellent job showing why cross-site scripting is so dangerous. Was able to capture, some cookies and reuse those cookies to get access into an admin panel, right?
Which is classic, but also it's code execution. We just, you're right, Bill. We lump it in it's just cross-site scripting, but it really, the name doesn't do it service. It's code execution.
That's right.
And that's the problem.
Well, I think over time, like what we've all seen is that like, oh, cool, we got the box that says like XXX here, right? Like, oh, okay, cool. Like, and well, we'll mark that down and move on. But you're absolutely right. Like,
there needs to be a qualifier, I feel like, for cross-site scripting, like a subcategory, because sometimes it is just like I can execute a tiny bit of JavaScript and to get to the next level be super hard, and then there's other ones like number 18 in my stories where you get code execution. So cross-site scripting comes in different shapes and sizes, right?
Yeah, and stored and versus reflected, and just all of these things that really do change the the severity and impact of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
I almost wanted to prep us for a segment where we talk about our favorite things, because it's like Christmas time and like end of year wrap up kind of time. And I do have to say,
paper brown packages all tied up with string.
Right. Yes. This was some of my favorite things. One of my favorite things this year, and I've talked about it on the show before, so I won't belabor it.
When the dog bites?
Yes. It's actually kind of fitting because Watchtower Labs has kind of been the dog, and they've been taking some chunks out of large enterprise company software
and leaving you with brown paper packages.
Oh my gosh. And just doing such a great job. I mean, this is their latest entry. I called it my second favorite research blog because Eclipsium is my favorite one, but they're doing an amazing job. This was when they were discovering vulnerabilities in MyTel MyCollab, which is like a VoIP kind of enterprise VoIP service. And again, the memes are on point. The research is on point. It's an engaging read. And this one kind of calls out web server rewrite rules and how those can be abused on these systems. Is the overview of the technical details. So found a couple of vulnerabilities, and just again, the write-ups are just on point.
I feel like if you want your article to get reviewed by Paul, just put memes in there. And
it's part of it, man. Like you got to have your meme game has to be on point. That's important. That's important.
Billy's gonna hate our fucking talk.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sure there's no memes in your Shmoocon talk, which is a great segue into well, if you need memes, you want to come. But a great segue.
I know what channel we can get them out of.
Right?
Yeah.
That might be dicey. you guys are giving it. Do we talk about how? I don't want to
we-
give too much away from the talk.
We briefly talked about it a little bit at the end of the show last week, but it was really quick.
Basically, Bill wrote some code for the cheap yellow display that discovers AirTags.
Yeah.
And that's probably in your talk description, right? I don't want to give anything more away.
Yep.
I played around with it. I looked at the code. I owe you guys some more time on that project. Really out of general curiosity, similar to Inbar, right? I'm curious and I want to learn. And I thought this was a great project to do that. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is going to be a really cool talk. So, so both Larry and I will be presenting next month at Shmoo. Please attend and come say hi to us afterwards. Come do a meet and greet. Happy to chat. But this is been a project that Larry and I have been working on for what couple months now.
Yep.
Yeah, not too long. I want to challenge you guys though, and kind of in prep for your talk, right? In old school Shmoocon fashion, where we could throw shmoo balls because we want to challenge the presenter.
Hell yeah.
If I look at your talk in the project and I go, I can do that with my Android phone. Why do I need this?
Yeah,
because help me get people to go to your talk, right? Like
because my Android phone was how many hundreds of dollars?
Okay,
and my cheap yellow display was
$14.99 on.
It's
usually $14.67. It's never like that round number on AliExpress.
It's actually $11.16 if you buy them in bulk. Ask me how I know this.
Yep. I would actually take it a little bit different, from there. So yeah, that's definitely a solution. But really, like the path that we're going to be taking it is really kind of get you into that mindset of that. Hey, we can build our own hardware to solve specific problems. We'll walk you through what it took to build this, the code. And just show you that it's reachable. It's not something that you expect. That you have to be doing this for 20 years before you start developing. No, with the current set of development and hardware, like Larry said, the hardware is so cheap, right? Like, and we'll take you through that development process, but also learning about how Bluetooth trackers work, right?
Yep.
Like how they can be detected, and some use cases that have hit my personal life of why I want something like that. So,
what I hear you saying, Bill, is that if I've got an Android phone with an app, I have to use whatever that developer put into that app.
Well, and
if I go cheap yellow display, I can modify the code and try and make it do whatever I want to customize it for me, which I think is a huge win.
Yeah, and quite honestly, like that, it's not so much about like ours versus those or whatever. Like, cool. Like if you have a specific problem and you want to do that and you have access to an Android phone, cool, go do it that way.
Yep.
Right. This is more about like the hacker mindset of like, hey. We want something that's handheld that we could, like discover trackers, right? Like, that was something that I wanted to solve. Hey, here's how Bill would, solve these problems, right?
And Bill, to your point too, like it fascinated me about doing the AirTag stuff, but already having some knowledge about how some of the other trackers worked. It didn't just have to be about the AirTag. So like you said, Paul, I can do this with my Android phone. Why do I need to do this? But can you track tiles with your Android phone?
Right.
Can you track EBs and can you track cheap Chinese trackers? And
if I see a new tracker, I'd have to go beg the Android app developer to add support for that. Whereas your project, the community can add it.
And quite honestly, the community can add it. And I'm kind of and as part of some of the stuff that I've been working on, Bill, that I could add every tracker manufacturer right now.
Yeah.
And there's we'll talk about that in the talk about that there may be some subtle differences, and we're going to have to start figuring out as a collective what some of those subtle differences, because we've got examples that we will describe what those subtle differences are.
I love it.
Yeah, and
Great job, guys.
quite honestly, so like we're kind of getting to the technical bits. Like, this is going to be a fun talk. It's going to you're going to walk away, having learned something. Larry's already, like has some surprises in store that just crack me up. And, it's just going to be a fun old school hardware hacking type talk. Like, come out and say hello. Like, and quite honestly, throw something at us. Like, bring something and throw it at me. I don't care. Like, let's go. I'll throw it back.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And when I ask you you ask me how I know that, um, I ordered 150 of these cheap yellow displays last night.
What
I,
an idiot.
yeah, and I had to do it in 3 orders because I couldn't order more than 50 of them at a time because then all of a sudden AliExpress like complained at me and all this stuff. But in any case, I will have a bunch of these with me, and I will say I'm going to sell them for $15. We'll do PayPal, Venmo, Cash, any of that type of stuff. But if you can convince me a good reason why I should give you one for free,
Hell yeah.
like if you're
Yeah, I've
like
done that before. And I love
Yeah.
this because you're
So,
getting a great
like
conversation.
like if you're a student or I want to do this, and well, great, write me a
Right.
blog. Yeah, you do that and you put a blog post because that's really cool. Yeah.
Yep.
So we know what the stocking stuffers in the Pesci household are going to be.
Right.
I got to take all those to Shmoocon.
And you can put them in your check bag.
Shall
'cause
I ask
they don't
you
come with
again about
batteries.
10:30 on the 24th?
What's that? Yeah.
Right.
That-
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
you know, like when you're rushing around, like, oh man.
I feel sorry for when we have someone ever come to visit watch the house for us when we travel because there's always so many damn packages
Mm.
that show up like
With that yellow tape, right? Like from China, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yep.
I think,
Lee, I
by
wanted
the
to,
way, it's an awesome plan to sell them and also have the option for people to do a cool project that they'd write up for you. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to go lead your story number 1 where Rhode Island got hacked. Well, I'll say Rhode
Yeah,
Island. I put
so-
it as a more sensational headline, but
Yeah.
there was a state-run site that did a number of different things that was hacked.
Well, so it was a state-run site in that it
yeah.
was a state program
Mhm.
for SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, otherwise known as food stamps,
Mhm.
that was run in the state specifically
state, by
for the
Deloitte,
state,
right?
by Deloitte.
Yes.
But the best part is, Deloitte had been told for 6 years
Bro.
Yeah.
that the site was vulnerable.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't ask
It was-
around
it
in my
was-
network
I didn't
for any
either.
inside information.
But
on
I
this
didn't
one.
either. But it was actually some of the stuff that was on the local news last night that they had
Yeah.
been reported, that had been reported to them either 5 or 6 years ago that the site was vulnerable and they hadn't
Boo
fixed it.
to you, Deloitte. Terrible. Like, sorry.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
so. But you got to give Rhode Island some credit here. I mean, they put out cool guidance on their Department of Administration site about what's going on. They rolled back to paper, which blows, but they didn't
Mhm.
shutter the doors, right?
Right.
They're making the most out of it. Well, and I guess it's what the Brain Cipher gang is the one who did the ransomware. I guess you could say something about Deloitte had 6 years where nothing happened, but that does feels wrong.
Yeah.
But-
I do not have any specific evidence,
Mhm.
like a print article to say that has happened. It was what I heard on the news.
Yeah,
On the
so
actual,
You can't turn
anecdotally-
on. Turn on the news on here in Rhode Island to a local station, and they're talking about this.
Yep.
Do we
Yeah,
know what the flaw was? What, like what?
I don't think we have any details.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they probably haven't released that.
I
Yet. Well, I mean, think about how Brain Cipher ransomware gang does its thing. Like, how do they do that?
Mhm.
What does their typical attack vector look like? You'd arguably think if it's ransomware, it's going to be phishing or something like that. But
Mhm.
clearly, this was something different,
And-
especially if the vulnerability had been reported or vulnerabilities had been reported 6 years ago that they did nothing about.
It
No.
doesn't feel quite Deloitte-like to ignore it, but there's still got to be a kernel of truth in there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Who
So
knows?
I'm-
It could have been Deloitte went to the state of Rhode Island and was like, "Hey, we need to apply these updates, and we have to bill you for it."
Yep.
And Rhode Island was like, "No,
Nope.
we got bridges to fix. Sorry."
which the irony is that the portal name for this particular program is called RI Bridges.
All right, bridges.
For those of those who are not in the know, we have one main artery of a highway that goes through the state. Interstate 95, Interstate
Is it
95
or 195
and
for both?
195.
Yeah,
But 195 is one of the main arteries into the city of Providence from half of the state.
right.
Actually had a massive bridge failure that they actually had to close the bridge and they have demolished it.
But they knew about the whole thing is like they knew about
But
it and they didn't fix it, and
Yep.
everyone's doing the hand waving and finger pointing, and
Yep. And the company that built the bridge in like the 70s or 80s or whenever it was, is now the one that is getting paid to tear it down, and was also the lowest bidder to build the new one.
welcome to Rhode Island.
Like, good Lord.
How are
So-
we preventing recurrence?
Oh my god.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, by the way, I all levity aside, I feel horrible for the state having to deal with this. Or better yet, the
Yeah.
people that need the benefits. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't wish that on anybody.
The benefits, especially at this time of year.
Yeah, this
Like-
time of year, particularly, nutrition, childcare assistance, welfare, that kind of stuff. This is not generally optional things you need. These are things for survival.
I think it was healthcare too. Was Health Source RI part of this program as well? I
let's
thought I
see
heard something
here.
about that.
I don't know.
Medicaid, supplemental nutritional assistance, temporary assistance for needy families, child care assistance program, healthy coverage purchased through Health Source Rhode Island.
Yep, that's
Rhode
the one.
Island Works,
Yep.
long-term service and support, general public assistance, and at-home cost share. These aren't, like I said, these aren't things you trivially seek out, right? These
Yeah.
are things like you're at survival, your back's against the wall,
Yep.
and
I did want to transition, Bill, to your story number 2 about TP-Link. It's this is interesting for a lot of reasons, and I haven't followed this one too closely, but I remember we covered a story. I don't think we talked about it in depth, or maybe I don't know if I might have just mentioned it, but there was a story I read where an investigation revealed that Chinese threat actors were targeting TP-Link routers, compromising them, and then using them for password spraying against Microsoft Windows like Active Directory domains, and that kind of caught people's attention. When I look at this, and so now, like, I don't know what's happening now, but like there's this big hoopla about TP-Link that's happening recently, and so what's happening now? Because this someone else at my day job sent this to me too. Like, look what's going on with TP-Link.
Yeah, so
Looking
this
to
is kind
ban
of
them?
just emerging today. And, so this was actually the last story. I don't know how it ended up being my number 2, but it was the last story that I submitted just because I saw it right before I got on. But from what I'm seeing is that there is some discussion that the U.S. may ban TP-Link. And so, like, obviously the biggest concern that sticks out probably to everybody, on this panel and probably everyone listens is just how much TP-Link is used in the United States. Like, it's a very, very popular brand.
Yeah, they have 65. They allegedly have 65% of the home consumer router
Oh,
market.
really? I
Right,
didn't
yeah.
know it was that high.
Ouch.
Interesting.
And from what I understand, it's not so much that that the nation state actors are leveraging vulnerabilities that have been found in this. It's been the way that TP-Link has responded to vulnerability disclosure is that that perhaps now, and Paul, you may know more about this than I do, but it's kind of feeling a little delinky, right? Like
Yep,
where vulnerabilities have been disclosed and they have not been addressed. And then we see nation state actors leveraging those vulnerabilities and, hey, it's been disclosed. We knew about it, and now we see it being used. Maybe, who knows what the backstory is, right?
So I think one of the things that struck me about this story is that that one of the things that came out was that TP-Link releases routers that have vulnerabilities and then doesn't do anything about it. But I think that is very representative of many of the
I agree.
consumer router
Yeah,
brands there. The other one too that I want to pull out too, Bill, is there was I don't remember what it was, but there was a specific router model that was targeted as part of this stuff, if I remember correctly. Do you remember what it was?
I don't.
No. So that's a great exercise for the reader. Do you also know what the end of life status of that router was?
Probably end of life would be my
probably,
guess.
yeah.
That's an
years.
interesting.
It's
you know,
2
that's-
years. Yeah.
yeah.
It's 2 years out of end of life.
I saw a trend this year where there was multiple GitHub accounts posting vulnerability disclosure and oftentimes exploits. If not, there was enough information for you to develop an exploit fairly easily for largely TP-Link, D-Link, and a bunch of other routers that, like, I can't remember the name. Not Netgear though, which is Netgear is, I think, at the cream of the crop when we're talking about this. I've talked about their bug bounty program before, but when we're talking about TP-Link and D-Link, there's a lot of like just weird GitHub accounts that, because it comes across in my feeds, because I got like, I get a lot of firmware stuff. I've tuned some of my smart searches for routers, and all these GitHubs are posting these proof of concepts, disclosing vulnerabilities, and like not all of them are getting CVEs, not all of them are getting fixed, right? Because it's an end of life, and D-Link or TP-Link or other manufacturers are like, well, we're not going to fix it because it's end of life, and we don't support that particular router anymore. And this is becoming a huge problem. It's, in my mind, falls under critical infrastructure, because if you get enough of the routers on the internet, right, in the US, you could cause disruptions or conduct attacks riding on the infrastructure that's maybe not owned by the ISP, but it's owned by the individual, and that's their access to the internet. So it has to be there, has to be on the internet. And if there are vulnerabilities that aren't being fixed because they're end of life, naturally, this is where attackers are going to gravitate towards. This is great. It's exposed to the internet. It's easy to exploit. Things aren't getting fixed. Like, why would you think attackers weren't going to go here and use it to accomplish their goals, and however they're going to use it?
That part of the claim is that TP-Link is selling them for less than retail. In other words, to flood the market with their vulnerable products. Sorry to use the cliche, but think about it. You could totally stack the deck by doing something like that. I mean, I was looking at a project once. I had a recommendation to look at TP-Link. They were the fraction of the cost of some of the others out there, and in a project that never went anywhere. But there was like no budget. It would have been like that.
I mean, that's straight out of the Huawei playbook, right? I mean, that's exactly how Huawei.
That was
so
exactly
what they're saying is they're purposely, China is behind the scheme to purposely flood the U.S. market with vulnerable routers at a loss, so more people buy them and deploy them and leave them there.
I mean, I'd love to be wrong about that.
I would too, but something tells me that we're not wrong.
Yeah. But
right.
Yeah. So
I mean, we've seen this trend. I mean, Larry and I noticed this trend in 2006.
Yep.
This was a trend. I mean, back then it was Linksys, but Linksys got folded into Cisco and then back out. And
so you just made a comment about that Linksys is make sure that I have this right. So if I remember, is the cream of the crop, right? Like
Netgear. Netgear was the vendor.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Like, and do you stand by that statement? I mean, like, do we know that to be true? Like,
and to my knowledge, Bill, one data point is they're one of the only router manufacturers that have a significant foothold, anyhow, that have an established bug bounty program. They actually use BugCrowd for their bug bounty program. And because I did this research earlier this year, in scope of that bug bounty program is firmware running on supported devices. So you may find a bug bounty program from other manufacturers, but a lot of times, a lot of their models and or firmware-based devices are out of scope for that. So like Netgear was the one I did a whole ton of zeroed in on it. I was like, Matt Brown has submitted to their Netgear's bug bounty program successfully. So they are actively taking in reports. They are fixing them and paying out bounties. You can go on BugCrowd site and you can see the somewhat anonymized data, but you can see their bug reports that are filed. Payments have been made, and I think that tells me they're using an established company. They're running a great bug bounty program. People are finding stuff and they're fixing it. I think that's phenomenal. Why can't everyone else fall in line with this? I didn't find that. I'll name names. I'm not saying they're bad companies, but like I was looking for, does Fortinet have one? Does F5, Avanti? When I found that they may have them for certain websites or something, but typically the firmware doesn't fall in scope. Now, if I'm wrong, please write in and correct me, and I'll talk about it on the next show. That's fine. But what I remember looking at was the major manufacturers didn't. Cisco has it, but I'm not. Cisco's bug bounty program or whatever programs they have are just massive, so they could have something better. But Netgear stood out to me.
The other one that is interesting when we start talking something like Netgear in this whole scenario is, do you know where Netgear is based?
No.
United States.
Oh, okay. As I was talking before, I was like, is it because Netgear is not so much a Chinese-based company, or they're based somewhere else? Yeah.
So
You know,
My segue from this story was to Larry's number 2 and Paul's number 19, which I think I had on the docket for last week. But
I think so too. The OpenWrt.
yeah, because I thought that, I think you guys looked at it enough to even worth write a book about. But I was just thinking what you guys thought of that vulnerability and stuff.
I think it was addressed very quickly by OpenWrt, and
Oh yeah, it was. It
never
was like
right.
quick.
It never got out into the wild, right? But
No.
someone did discover that they could backdoor firmware. Is that? I didn't follow the story closely because
they had a they had a SHA-256 hash, but they only used the first 48 bytes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could match, firmware with the signature that the first 48 bits match, you could shove in replacement firmware, and it was exacerbated by, it was a part of that function they have, and I'm forgetting the name of the function, but it was designed to download new firmware while presuming any add-ons you'd put into OpenWrt, because it was a pain to redo those manually, which makes perfect sense. I mean, it was a very well-intended function in there, but that was what was vulnerable. And that's just why I'm looking at you two, because you've got like more depth on OpenWrt than I do.
It's really
not to put you on the spot, and I am putting you on the spot.
In general, it's difficult to validate firmware.
Mm-hmm.
Do the integrity checking on it. However you're doing that, it's super difficult, right?
Yeah, of course.
There's always a way to fool it, right? And get around that kind of stuff. So validating firmware is a super hard problem. And there's like a storied history of the bugs that have been found. There's also research this year, right, which I love, the checkup vulnerability about how secure updates work, which is another kind of similar way to backdoor firmware, is if it's not validating the updates. I think part of that problem is lack of a standard, because when you're bouncing around to different hardware and CPU architecture, the security mechanisms, secure boot and trust zones and all that stuff are different, whether you're talking about ARM, whether you're talking about MIPS, whether you're talking about Intel or AMD. It's all different. That is one kind of resounding endorsement for UEFI, which is an attempt to standardize that on Intel and AMD. And a lot of systems you can play UEFI to multiple systems, right? But it's an attempt to standardize that validation. Of course, once you have that validation, you have to hope that if you've created the standard, whether you're the UEFI Council or Intel or AMD, you've made these security mechanisms available. You have to hope that people adopt them and implement them correctly, right?
What?
Which doesn't always happen.
Accountability.
That's crazy talk. What the hell?
I live in a world where we look at systems and go, well, you didn't enable Intel's boot guard, and so that means people can modify UEFI willy-nilly because you just didn't enable it. And probably the reason is kind of super hard to do that.
I was just going to say, but doing that is hard, Paul.
Security
Security is hard.
Boot guard's hard.
But I got to deliver a week before Tuesday. Come on.
Hard in the sense that like there's a supply chain and like a trust tree that has to happen. Things need to be fused into hardware. I mean, not saying it's like super technically difficult compared to other things, but there's certain things that need to happen. Like as a user, you can't remediate that, right? You need to go to your OEM or whatever.
Right. And we could argue whether the security mechanisms that's there today are good, bad, or otherwise, but better focus on implement what's available. And then there's a different venue to say, let's make it better. Right. I mean, and I'm not trying to trivialize the implementation, but if you want to play in that technology space, whether it's OpenWrt or UEFI or whatever, you really need to do your due diligence and fully implement the security standards you have, or I should say safeguards rather than standards.
Yeah.
And like I said, then if you want to engage in a conversation on making it better, stronger, faster, whatever, let's go do it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. It's similar to, I was talking to Josh Corman about this, the shared responsibility we have with cloud computing. We have a similar shared responsibility model when it comes to embedded IoT systems, network devices, and appliances. in that there's multiple people that have responsibilities. You as the end user also have a responsibility, and we should have processes and facilities where we can double check, where we can go, is that really the firmware that I'm running? Right. I mean, I come to this because that's what in my day job, one of the things that we do, largely because there are flaws in the validation checks. There are flaws in the supply chain. The supply chain is complex. So we need that extra validation. But that's not to say all the responsibility should be in the end consumer of the enterprise. Others share that responsibility as well.
So where I was hoping you're going to take it, Lee, was, so we were just talking about bug bounty programs, and so I'm curious, just how does everybody feel, right? Like if a company does not have a bug bounty program run by, whether they self-hosted or they use a trusted third party, like does that necessarily mean that they're not taking security like seriously, so what if they have, a strong red team inside that's doing those same things, right?
Right.
Sorry, when we're talking about this class of devices and firmware and hardware, that's why I'm snickering, because they usually don't. But it's a valid point, Bill, because my experience, a bug bounty is not necessarily the only thing that's indicative of a solid security program.
Yeah.
Right.
You work with it. I get more insights now as to the vulnerability disclosure process and what that looks like between companies and organizations that we may or may not be reporting to. Some are just phenomenal and it inspires confidence, and there's a whole spectrum, right?
Well,
some are awful, and some are everywhere in between, right?
Well, would you rather companies detect and fix those problems before they were delivered? Right.
Yes.
Right. So, that's, I'm obviously throwing the softball to your story number 9. Yahoo let go of their entire red team and is outsourcing, essentially outsourcing red team, which I read the articles, I think last week or whenever this came out. Obviously have some friends that are impacted there, those kind of things. But, so like, is it, I'm just curious how everybody else feels about that. Like, replacing, can you replace your internal team with a bug bounty? Would it be, it might be cheaper, right? Like, is it better?
Yeah.
So
this gets into like the incentive structure, right? Because if you've got a bug bounty, the bug bounty hunter's primary incentive is to make money, right? So it's not to find the most vulnerabilities in a particular product. Now I wish Casey was here to like counterpoint me on that, but like that's typically one of the complaints. I think bug bounty is a very important supplemental thing.
Yep.
I think you're right. An internal red team has a better incentive structure, that they're more incentivized to find all the vulnerabilities that they can to make the product more resilient. And I love that. But also, I mean, there's positive things for bug bounties too. I think having both is obviously the best case scenario.
For sure.
So if I think about it, like you probably want to have a really good, you want to have a decent red team on the inside to test your products before they go to market, so that you're at least doing a significant amount of due diligence before some of your product goes to market. Having a good vulnerability management team to respond to that. But so a good red team to find stuff before it goes to market, but that stuff is all going to be traditional pen test is only going to be so much time you can devote to pen testing that before you need to get something to market. So it's going to be limited time. By opening up that to a bug bounty program, it kind of allows continuous pen testing by the community with larger resources. But you don't want to take something that's completely untested and is garbage and release that on the world.
I agree.
Like, it needs to be a combined approach.
I'd also say that there's things in the development cycle that need to happen for firmware-based devices that I don't see as as advanced as I do with many software projects. Right? Like the unit testing, the DevOps style approach of we're going to find the bugs and vulnerabilities, fix them as we go. Largely I don't see a lot of that happening in firmware-based devices. I mean, just by the vulnerabilities that you can find pretty easily in a lot of different. And you can take. I mean, I'll talk about Emma. Right, Emma just had an update is the framework to analyze firmware.
Yep.
You can go find firmware on the internet, run it through Emma. You can find tons of vulnerabilities. Now, are they accessible, exploitable,
Right.
whatever? But
Right.
just lifting the covers on this firmware, as I've said before, is kind of like, whoa.
The other one too is that if you think about it, like, you know, we go back to OpenWrt, that in so many cases on a firmware-based embedded type device, how
Mhm.
often as a developer of one of those devices, manufacturer of one of those devices, are you left beholden to third-party code?
Correct.
It's not stuff that you wrote, that it's not your CI/CD pipeline,
Right.
that you're left holding the bag for this type of stuff. So arguably there are other approaches that
Well,
you
you
need
get
to
into
take there as
dependency
well.
hell,
You
right?
do.
And getting out of dependency hell is tough.
Yep. Unless you're doing it all from scratch, you don't have as much control as you might with
Right.
something else. Like,
And is it even practical to create it all from scratch anymore?
no.
No.
Um,
And how many vulnerabilities are going to come if you do it from scratch?
right.
Yeah, but you have better control of that CI/CD pipeline, so you can eliminate them from the start.
Right.
But it's circular, and
Well,
we're back to dependency hell again.
Yeah.
Right.
It ties in I don't know if you guys read my story number 3. Why can't you fix this bug faster?
You mean 23?
23.
Is it 2 in
sorry.
front of that 3?
Yeah, 23. Why can't you fix this bug faster? So there were some great points the author made in this article. It was coming from a person who had experience in finding and reporting bugs. It was kind of like, it was nice to see the progression of the perception that this person had in the beginning, and going, wow, developers just make all these mistakes and poo-poo on you developers. And it was an us versus them kind of mentality. And as this person matured, he's like, you really got to partner with developers, because writing software is really hard, right? No matter what you're writing, it's hard. And he was talking about the context, right? That often mismatched context. Whereas as bug hunter, you're like, this is a huge deal. But to the people who know all the ins and outs of the hardware, firmware, software that maybe you found a bug in, they're like, maybe it's not that big of a deal. The local versus remote impact assessment, I oftentimes disagree with. Like, I'm a team local privilege escalation, or local, authenticated bugs, I should say. Like, once you're authenticated to the device, those matter to me. I think we're too quick as an industry to dismiss them, because oftentimes there's a path for attackers to chain vulnerabilities together, password-based attacks coupled with authentication bypass vulnerabilities, and then it's like, oh, now I can just use these other vulnerabilities that no one paid attention to and patched to escalate on the system. We saw that a lot this year, for sure. And it's a big problem. We don't have a great way to tie vulnerabilities together and do a risk assessment on them.
Right. I've just been skimming this article, and this guy's hitting a lot of really important points.
Agreed.
I remember a story a friend of mine told me years ago about when they were repping a company that sold a big ERP platform, that the customer wanted them to sign an agreement to fix all discovered vulnerabilities within 72 hours or something. And okay,
All
that's fine on a
discovered
small
vulnerabilities,
software
right?
project, but for an ERP system, which
Right.
included the app server and web server, there's no way. And like you said, you were saying context and risk, and how exploitable is it? All those things that are all part of the conversation on fixing any given issue. That's a nice maturity based article. Actually, it's like, looking back, I thought this was the end of the world, but it turns out I can see their point of view now. It's a good. That's like, I'd tell that person who had made that request to go read this damn thing.
Yeah, because and oftentimes, what what we run into is that there's a supply chain, right? And where in the supply chain did you find the vulnerability? If it's earlier in the supply chain you find the vulnerability, right, upstream, I guess you could say, the more other people have to implement that fix, and it has to trickle down. So it may not be your problem from your code, but you've got to take an update from someone that you included a component from. Then you have to do regression testing. You have to implement that fix. Then you have to push it out. So oftentimes, if you're disclosing a vulnerability upstream in the supply chain, the length of time for, before public announcement is greatly increased, because they want to give everyone in the supply chain time to analyze, to fix and test, and push that out. And that's often what we see in things like UEFI and other things, is it's just the nature of the beast, right? Another great example, Iceman was talking about the vulnerabilities in hotel keycard readers. And that's another case that I think is super interesting because yes, we know there's a vulnerability. Someone has exploits for that vulnerability, essentially can gain access to hotel keycard readers, hotel rooms. We
Hmm.
don't want that necessarily all to be public because it's going to take the industry a super long time to upgrade those key readers. And when I asked Iceman, I'm like, "Is that something you have to physically go to each door?" He's like,
Yep.
"Yes."
So
Think about how many
interesting.
hotel rooms are
Yeah.
in the world today, right?
So interesting about that story. The other night, it was a couple weeks ago. I was out and I got talking to, I was sitting in the bar and I was talking to the guy, and he had come down from Kansas City, or he'd come down to Kansas City. He was from wherever, and I asked him what he was doing here, and he's like, "Well, I manage the hotels, or a couple hotels in the area." Cool. What are you doing? Well, they're making me go and change all the door locks.
Mm,
I was like, "Oh, really? Like, why?" And he's like, I don't know." And I was like, "Is it because of that issue right there?" And
yeah.
it turned out it was. And um, it was just interesting to hear, that he had he had an understanding of what the flaw was, that
Mhm.
there was an exploit, and we started talking about okay, so what's the likelihood of that occurring, right? And then I was like, and he was like, "Well, on the back end, nobody thinks that anybody could do this." And I was like, "Well, look, you're randomly at some bar, and the person you're sitting right next to has the skills, and the
Right. Probably has a
capability,
device in his pocket that could
right,
do
to
some
to
level of
to
attack. Yeah.
do this, right?" Like, obviously, I would never, but it was such an interesting conversation, because it was kind of the first realization for him that, hey, there are people that
That know how to
exist
do this.
that know how to do this,
And it's
right?
not a small number of
That's
people.
right.
Also, but it made me think about he's contracted to change out all the locks in a hotel. You have the project planning around when that
Yeah,
work can happen must
right.
be amazing, right? You think about a hotel. People are in and out of they how do you hold a room while not only you have to worry about it getting clean, now you worry about the lock getting
Yeah.
man, that must be a logistics
Well, and
nightmare.
so, like, I don't want to, like, talk about names, but so this specific name was attached to a very, very large brand of hotels, but it was it's an independently owned hotel. So
Mhm.
it was really interesting conversation with this guy. It turns out a
Yeah.
lot of hotels are franchises.
Mhm.
And I had no idea. And obviously the franchise owner doesn't want to spend a ton of money replacing locks, but
Can
the
imagine.
big brand was forcing their hand to do that. And well, good on them, man. I'm glad to
Right.
I'm glad to hear that, right? So, just imagine the liability if they didn't and something that happened, right?
Mhm.
um
Awesome.
yeah.
What else? We wanna talk about AI, LLMs? We got Jeff's not here to poo-poo that. I don't know what is so my story number 24, Invicti, Security, who was a sponsor on the show,
Hmm.
for a while, actually. They created a smart web fuzzing tool that combines local LLM models,
Wait,
via
what
Llama.
story of this is yours?
Oh, sorry, did I get the number wrong
You said
again?
24.
It is my story number
Yeah,
24.
24.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. So fuzzing that uses,
Ooh,
local
refresh.
models to optimize directory and file discovery. I
Neat.
just I love
Oh
right,
yeah.
I love research like this because, I was looking at this for web scraping as well, and I think it's while different, but somewhat similar problems and challenges that we have, and obviously fuzzing and web scraping is something that we as security professionals and
Hmm.
hackers, right, we're like, we need these tools in our arsenal to do this, and there's always limitations and challenges when we if you've ever written any kind of web scraping code, it sucks.
Oh, it
It
sucks.
and then once you get it the kicker
What?
is,
Oh my
once you get it
God.
working, all they
Yeah.
have to do is make small changes on the website side, and your web scraper is completely broken.
Listen, man, that is the truth. Like, that it changed. Like, it is a nightmare to scrape.
Mhm.
I
So
have
what if
lived
we
in
could use an LLM to help us scrape. There's a couple of projects that are doing that as well. Now, I've looked more closely at the ones that are doing web scraping, and they're just not quite there. Like, it's just, I forget the technical details. There's a member of my team that did the more technical research and tested it. He was like, basically the high level is like, it's just not quite there. Like, it's promising, which gives me hope for the future. But the issue that I had when we were talking about this on a webinar I did the other yesterday, the problem is LLMs are based on what we know, right? It's basically like the collection of human knowledge. I don't think we still have challenges, I think, with fuzzing and web scraping. So we as humans haven't solved the problem. So when we go into an LLM to solve the problem, it's like, I can only tell you about problems that humans have already solved. Like,
Right.
I'm not great yet at
Yep.
extracting from that something new, because
So
it's not autonomous and fully self
so we
learning,
so we
right?
want to solve web scraping. So that's our first problem. So now we use AI to solve the problem of web scraping. We have two problems.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
It's like
Yes, good summary.
Tom Liston's joke about when you use when you use
Yeah,
Perl to solve
Perl,
a problem.
right.
First you have a problem and use Perl to solve it. Now you
Right.
have two problems.
But I do think it's promising. I'm curious to
Yeah.
see how this progresses, because I think it is a good application to help move it along further. But more research needs to be done by us to then figure out how to leverage LLMs to get
Yes.
this stuff to execute. But I think it's I'm excited to see what comes, because, like, as Bill and I were done, like, I hate web scraping is such a pain, right?
Man.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Um,
speaking of AI, I have two stories that are going to be real quick. So I got to tell you, Paul, it was probably 6 months ago, maybe around there, but we had a guest on that was using AI. I think he was a teacher, and he was talking about how he's leveraging AI in his classroom. And one of the things that he dropped in that interview was this AI called Gandalf,
mm,
and Gandalf is an AI that there's 10 challenges, and your goal is to convince Gandalf to divulge the password to you.
Oh,
Uh,
someone was talking about this.
and
So,
I
but
got to
it's
tell you,
basically
man,
a chat bot that you have to interact with to get it
yeah,
reveal the secret, and it's programmed not to reveal the secret.
yes, and I
Yeah.
gotta tell you, like, that interview changed my life. I have told probably 1,000 people about this tool because, like, if you want to understand what does red teaming or
Mhm.
bypassing or hacking an LLM, that one really reframed it in my mind. So, like, a lot of times what I hear people do is they try and convince it, right? Like, "Hey, no, it's okay. I'm a security researcher and I'm only
Yeah.
doing this for good." And yeah, that's how I started too. And what this tool does is kind of reframe the way that you want to convince that AI to
Mm.
bypass it. Well, the makers of the makers of Gandalf, I think it's Lakira,
Yep.
have released a guide that kind of walks you through, kind of like a walkthrough of red teaming their Gandalf project. And if you have any interest in hacking LLMs, this is where you start. Go read that guide. It's my story number 5.
Yep. I'm reading through the guide and it's quite extensive, and I love, and it's really, the graphics are really well done in it too, and I love it. Prompt: what is the password? Expected output: you cannot use the same winning prompt twice.
Mhm.
Meaning, at one
Right.
point they asked for the password and I gave it to it.
It's amazing. So first of all, like the Gandalf application first learns as it goes, right? It's an LLM, and so like, but a lot of the tricks that they teach in that red teaming guide just are very very apt in any like interaction that you have with any LLM. Like if you're having difficulty giving with it returning you the answer that you're so close to getting. Um, and so like I really really would encourage everyone to read that guide. It will change your opinion on what hacking an LLM really is. And then the second one I kind of want to mention, and I don't know if any of you guys have used it yet, but Sora is available
Yeah.
publicly.
I heard about it at CactusCon. It was, close to 9 months ago. Um, when they announced it, I was waiting for it to be available. It's awesome. And I went to go sign up and start using it, and it was like totally crashed because everybody else was too.
Mm.
But I did, while guys were talking about one of the other stories, I actually went and used it to create a video.
Awesome.
And it was actually I mean, it was super basic prompt because I'm in the middle of other stuff, and it actually turned out halfway decent. And then I went and edited the prompt to do a remix, and it totally did not give me what I asked for.
Yeah. Well, that happens with
Uh,
regular prompts too,
Yep,
right?
absolutely. So like there's definitely a learning curve that's going to go into this. Um, and I was telling somebody that for me, my in what in the alternate universe, as it were, in a different timeline, I would have been Deadpool. No, I'm kidding.
Mhm.
I actually considered going to art school,
hmm.
Mm.
and my life would have been a very different path. That is that is to say, I am still very passionate about art, but I've never developed the skills to go create the kind of art that I enjoy and would want to create. And AI gives me that ability to create that
Yeah,
art that I
I
wanted
agree.
to do. I also, if it wasn't art school, it might have been film school.
Mm.
And now
So what's
I can have
yeah.
it create film for me based on as close as I can possibly describe to my vision.
You can create cat videos like there's no tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know if we talked about it, but Sora is OpenAI's video generation tool. So
Yep.
we've seen, we certainly have seen the image generation and text generation, and now with OpenAI's
Now if we could
Sora.
only get good text on image, we'd be all
Right.
set.
I
Yeah,
know.
right.
Actually, man, I'm cool with it just keeping the text on images bad. That way I know, right? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've
right.
reached that
We'll reach a
point.
point where that's not the case, I think. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of video tools out there now. I mean, because I see sometimes the videos, I'm like, that looks really. I know that's not real, but man, it's pretty
Yeah.
convincing.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that I'm certainly not saying that this is the first AI video, but this is OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPTs. It has now made Sora generally available, and
Yeah,
if you go there, you can try it out. And like you, Larry, I tested it out today, and I couldn't believe what I was. I was just kind of making like something that might be a YouTube intro video or something like that. It was unbelievable what I was able to do in like 3 minutes. Just
nice.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah. I asked it to give me a longhorn chicken pecking the dirt in front of a barn with a field of hay with overcast skies and fog, and it
Wow.
did pretty good. So it gave me two videos. The first one, there was a bunch of chickens in the background. It was okay. The second one actually put like longhorn steer horns on the barn. Like, nope.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
So I remixed that one with because everything else was really good, and it did really well, except that it made it look like the chicken turned around, but it made it literally just transpose the head and the tail on the chicken instead of it actually turning. So it
Yeah.
was just like, and and if you
Hey,
look
did
and,
you?
and if you look at some of the featured videos on the page,
Yeah.
like they said, oh, take like this old school 1970s photograph of a family on Christmas and animate it. And at the start, it's like one of the packages rewraps itself under the tree, and a kid stands up and walks off and just disappears into the Christmas tree.
That's
It's like,
creepy.
ooh, that got dark.
Did you mention Tom Liston earlier?
I did.
This is now the second time we're going to mention Tom Liston, because we all know the La Brea
That was
Tar Pit,
beautiful. That was
right?
beautiful
Yeah.
transition.
Thank you. So there's a new project that, from what I gather, builds on La Brea Tar Pit, and they certainly credit Tom with that research and project, and they are aiming to make it better, and add some more features to it. They've released a GitHub, and the part where I picked out, like I went into the article, I'm like, where do you what are you doing different or better than the La Brea Tar Pit? So when scanners attempt to identify open TCP ports by sending SYN packets, our solution introduces a second layer of disruption. It delays SYNAC responses, sending them after a set time. And so that delay causes more delays than than Tom's original research. I think Tom was just like a silent drop, or maybe like just one SYNAC and then silence. This is kind of keeping the scanner. It sounds like keeping the scanner engaged with a timer.
We've seen one of these types of things before.
Yeah, I don't
where
think this is necessarily really new.
where I
but
remember talking about this, where like it would stand to keep the scanner occupied and put it in a and suck it in.
yeah,
And the tar pit part, right?
right. So I thought that was kind of neat, and like they have a GitHub, so you can go test it out for yourself.
Ants.
Ethical Hacker Gift Guide, my story number 25. It was kind of interesting. There's some stuff on here I maybe hadn't heard of before. They talk about Hack5's pen test gear, Jimmy Long's lockpicks. Do you guys use Jimmy Long's lockpicks?
Southord, you mean? No.
No.
I mean, I've got more lockpicks than I know what to do with at this point. So
right. There's some interesting things on there, some hacker attire and stuff like that.
black and white coffee roasters.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys had.
This is the just for fun section.
I don't know if you guys had gift guides. I know we did the hacker gadgets. I believe
that was our gift guide. I think
that was probably more of our gift guide. I do have to say, after that segment, I like the LilyGo stuff.
Yeah.
And I've been experimenting with the LilyGo stuff, and I've got some more stuff that I think will be delivered pretty soon, actually, which I'm excited about. But their stuff is pretty awesome. There's some projects out there that are doing let's replace the Flipper Zero with something cheaper, which I love. All the projects that I think one of the fantastic things that the Flipper Zero did for the community was make people go, hey, wait, I'm a hacker. I can make my own Flipper Zero out of and build write programs for this embedded hardware. What embedded hardware is pretty similar.
Can I do that with a cheap yellow display?
I know Marauder runs on the cheap yellow display.
It does.
And so does Bruce.
Totally does.
Yeah.
Totally does.
So it's similar. Marauder, I think, goes on some of these platforms as well. But they got you talked about the wasn't the T embed. What was the one that looks like a BlackBerry? It's not the T embed.
The T-beam.
T-beam.
So there's the T-beam that does the messaging.
Yep.
Which one is
the T embed is the one that actually almost looks like a Flipper Zero. Yep. There's a couple of different models, and so I've got some on order. And the Bruce firmware is supported on there, so I'm excited to play around with some of that LilyGo gear.
Yeah, so I can't remember which one the LilyGo one is. Keep talking. Vamp for a minute, and I'll see if I can find it.
So don't make the mistake that I made. There's a LilyGo T embed that doesn't have a CC1101. But if you order the LilyGo T embed CC1101, the other major difference is, other than including that chip, is that the LilyGo CC1101 comes with the case and a battery.
It's the T-Deck.
A T-Deck.
The LilyGo T-Deck, yep.
The LilyGo T embed just comes with the face display and no battery or case. Hence, when I was messaging you guys, I was like, "Yeah, now I'm kind of in search for a battery."
But Bill was being a little bitch and didn't want to talk about battery at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Because what is the battery connector called?
JST.
JST.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and those are the batteries that you would see in the small electronics,
like RC cars and
yeah,
kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And of course,
and there's like a million. Now I know why Bill is like, I don't want to talk about it, because I started doing research and I'm like, holy crap, there's like millions of these. How do I know it's the right voltage and I think the connectors, the JST connector is standard, right?
That's the thing. Most of the batteries you're going to find with this stuff is going to be 3.7 volts.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically for the cheap yellow display, it runs on 5.
Yeah.
So you need to use a buck converter.
Yeah.
And I totally don't want to do that. But I'm hearing you can power it with 3.7, and it's sometimes okay depending on what you're doing. But if you're doing anything wireless, it's garbage.
Yeah. So the real.
Well, I'm sure we'll get copious amounts of details in your talk.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Good idea. So, and of course, as I was getting ready to walk out to the door to come to the studio for the podcast tonight, I'm like, I really need to see if I can get a JST connector. And I looked down at my desk. I'm like, holy crap, I just have this nice battery that I pulled out of something, and it looks like a JST. It's a 3-pin JST connector, not a 4-pin.
So this is when we get into this. Yeah, this is the struggle.
Yep. Which, of course, that was part of my discussion why Bill was getting messages about batteries for this thing at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Literally 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
But in my defense, Bill, it's 6 o'clock for me, which is still fucking early.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was on Amazon searching for batteries and realized that I hadn't clicked checkout on the stuff in my cart that was intended for Christmas. Whoops. Oh, well. So here we go.
There was some other hardware hacking related kind of stuff in there. Someone created a malicious NVMe. My story number 30. this was really cool. And like super, super involved and detailed. This is the one where, yeah, there's a PDF. So read more about it in their paper. So there's a whole academic paper associated with it. It's basically how to access memory with no
DMA
restrictions.
is it DMA
DMA, it's a
attack?
Yeah.
DMA
Oh,
attack. Yeah,
jeez.
DMA attack via NVMe. Hardware details, the whole thing. And I was like, so if you're interested in DMA attacks using NVMe, that's where you start. I had a couple of them like that. What was the other hardware one? There was another.
Speaking of hardware, Lee disappeared because it looks like his internet is down. Cable
Oh,
modem is
bummer.
TP link.
cable modem is not booting, but he's trying to rejoin soon here.
There was another one that was
You're
the
33, I think.
Yes, thank you, Bill. New Dog Old Tricks, damage card attacks. Wow, is this
DMA attack
a
again.
long read? I did not read the entire thing, but it looks like they created custom hardware that interfaces with the PCI bus, includes DMA. What was the description? I had an LLM, maybe it was an LLM that might have done this description. So Positive Technologies, who's done a lot of like low-level attacks in the past, has identified a vulnerability termed damage card that exploits DMA capabilities of SD Express cards to access system memory directly. This vulnerability arises from the integration of PCIe into SD Express cards intended to enhance
Neat.
data transfer speeds.
Yeah.
This integration inadvertently permits modified SD Express cards to bypass system protections and gain unauthorized memory access.
That's
awesome.
badass. I've never actually heard of SD Express before.
I hadn't either till I started reading. I mean, this is like
It
scrolls.
looks like
Yeah.
we've heard of PCMCA, we've heard of Express 34, which was a pin replacement for that, but I had never heard of SD Express or micro SD Express for that matter.
Yeah, it's again, this is like a whole thing.
Yeah, so not only do you have to have the card that does it, but you have to have a reader that supports it.
And I think they're building support in, or I don't again, it was too long, didn't read.
Well, if that's the case, like they're building support in, then they're just starting to see readers and owned,
correct,
right? Like
correct.
before we even see mass adoption of the technology.
Yeah. I have to go back and read and digest this one because it's a lengthy article.
I like the old dog new tricks, and that here we go. Let's keep DMA enabling externally accessible technology that, with the issues with DMA, we get access to memory. Like, yep. It's the old dog. It's all on DMA based attacks, but we're just now exposing it via new interfaces, which is stop.
Oh, my story number 35 goes back to exploiting InTune, which we talked about some time ago, because when I was rebuilding computers, remember this story? I was rebuilding computers, putting a fresh copy of Windows on there.
Yes.
Blowing the whole drive away. EFI partition and everything, rebuilding the whole thing. And it prompted me to log into the domain.
Yep.
And I was like, how?
You wipe the drive, you completely remove all the partitions, you boot it up, fresh install Windows, and it's asking you to join the domain.
And I'm like, I didn't tell you to do that.
You shouldn't have no idea about a domain.
And I think Tyler Robinson explained it on the show. And there's something to do with InTune policies that can accomplish that. And I was like, wait, so you're telling me that any computer can join a domain if InTune policies are set correctly? It's going to do some magic and have it join the domain. I'm like, can that be used maliciously? He's like, yeah, absolutely. He's like, I actually started looking into that. And then I saw this from SecureWorks. It's called PyTune, as a post-exploitation tool for enrolling a fake device into InTune with multiple platform support. So it's not just Windows. They can get other devices to enroll into InTune. And this is recent research. It was presented at Black Hat Europe not too long ago.
Yep. Speaking of multi-platform support, what was that software package you were talking about earlier about keyboard mouse sharing?
Input Leap.
Thanks you.
Yeah.
I meant to take a note of that.
Yes. So I don't know if you guys have ever it's been a while since I've done Windows-based pen testing and all that stuff, right? But
Yeah.
maybe we could get someone on to talk about this because I think it's really cool. And as most of our listeners know, and you guys know, I don't really focus on Windows-based attacks. I do my best. I just personally don't find it as interesting as Linux and embedded applications and a lot of other technologies, right?
Yep.
But obviously, it's hugely important.
Right.
Most companies run on Windows.
And it's a lot of how we got our start.
Yeah.
Like we were hacking Windows
Hacking
networks.
Windows,
Yep.
right? But
Yeah.
the InTune policy thing, largely based on my experience, like it really intrigues me. So, and now here we have some new research that is kind of related to that. If you guys haven't tested out Emba, you got to use Emba. Emba's awesome for analyzing firmware. New release, new version of Binwalk. Time to update, some improvements there. Good stuff. If you want to bypass EDR, my story number 31, I thought this one was super interesting because if you don't want to mess with bootloaders or UEFI, but you want to get in before some Windows security controls kick in, this is apparently not like drastically new. It is a known technique, but this one, executables with NT process startup entry point and dependencies solely on nt.dll run prior to the complete initialization of the Windows operating system. So this is kind of like, I don't know where in the boot stage it is, somewhere when kernel's initializing would be my guess, right? There's a spot where if you put an executable, modify the corresponding registry key and place the executable in system root system32 directory, it'll execute your code before the initialization of the operating system. This was new to me. And this repo is only 2 weeks old, but they do say something about historically attackers have exploited this mechanism as a rudimentary persistence method. So it is kind of a known thing. I thought it was kind of cool.
That's neat.
What else we got? Light a cigar.
What else do we got here? Let me go back and look at some of my stories here. I didn't have a ton of them this year because, well, holiday season. You were out last week, so you got the double dose.
Yeah, I got the double dose.
We kind of covered this. Oh, kind of covered this one last week. DHS says China or Russia, Iran, and Israel are spying on people in the U.S. with SS7. So, Bill, I think this was kind of one that we were hoping you were here for last week, but you weren't.
Is this related to Salt Typhoon?
Yeah, ultimately it is. Yeah, so ultimately Salt Typhoon getting access to cellular networks, those components of the cellular networks responsible for dealing with cellular traffic using the SS7 protocol, and arguably those systems being taken control of were those as part of Kalia for doing legal wiretapping, but now being used by unauthorized parties to perform unauthorized wiretaps over SS7. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Salt Typhoon mess just keeps...
Just the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, are you still looking into that, Paul? Like, where are you, like...
Not as heavily now, because I'm kind of over it,
Mm-hmm.
right? We only have so much attention span for things, and I think I started to lose interest when most of the articles about the typhoons started getting like really fluffy.
Yep.
Started talking about legislation and the whole thing. It stopped being technical. There wasn't a lot of TTPs or IOCs, being talked about. So
Yep.
I mean, I'll re-engage if we get new information.
Yep.
But the investigation's still ongoing. So
yeah,
I actually checked with like some of my sources, and a lot of the answers were TOP red, man. Like, so we're not. I want at some point for us to know what was happening and get some IOCs. But
yeah, I think for me, the Salt Typhoon is less interesting because there's not a lot I can do to fix or prevent the problem aside from things that we already do, like signal and encrypted communications over those networks. But the Volt Typhoon is the one that is more interesting because of the destination of the types of devices, the home consumer routers, and some of those types of things.
Well, yeah, that's where we get more excited at Eclipsium when it's a security appliance, I'll say.
Yep.
So,
right?
so CISA did release so a mobile communications best practice guide. They released it today in response to the Salt Typhoon attacks.
Yeah.
What,
It,
what,
and for the record, it is open for public comment.
that's right. It's open for public comment. But I do think that their recommendations are interesting because so what's interesting. So the statement that you made, Larry, that you wish that I would have been there for that conversation. The problem is I haven't been in that job for so long. I don't have any
Mm.
information about what's going on and those kind of things. But what I do know is I have been involved with with the U.S. government in response to other APTs, and there's the why behind the recommendations is always really interesting to me. But so the recommendations they make is only use end-to-end encrypted communications. Number one, that's the first one.
Yeah.
Only
Good.
use, right?
Okay.
So so I've been
Great. So
a
how do I do an end-to-end encrypted phone call?
signal,
Okay. How does my 85-year-old mother
right?
do?
Signal. I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
know.
Signal. Right. Yeah.
Right. The answer
Exactly.
is Signal.
Can
Right.
my mom get Signal on her flip phone?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So enable FIDO phishing resistant
Did you say
authentication.
fisting
I did.
resistance?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Be resistant to all of those things. But so
Yep.
and so again, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like I, who would consider myself on on the very forefront of security, have really just started using FIDO based authentication, and I'm not there, not anywhere close to being all of my authentication being FIDO based, right? So like, but I do think that that's an interesting recommendation because like not all services that I use even offer that capability, but so so their recommendation number two: use FIDO where they can.
And so the question is, Bill, how do you know they're using FIDO-based authentication?
Um, well, so I mean, like where you would have to either register a FIDO security key, like a like a YubiKey or a Google
Okay.
Titan,
Uh-huh.
or use the FIDO2 passkey type
Got it.
authentication. Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously migrate away from SMS for MFA. Please, please, please. If this is already happening because you can look at your phone and see SMS messages from your from anybody that's sending you that. Don't do that anymore. Use a password manager to store your passwords, which I think is interesting. Set a telco PIN. So most telecommunications offer you to set an additional PIN for security, which, by the way, as somebody who has been targeted, is very, very easy to bypass. So thanks, telcos. But the last one, I find very, very interesting as related to why we're talking about this one. Okay, so it was set a pin, regularly update software, always use the latest hardware revision from your cell phone provider. I get it. Okay. Do not use a VPN. So the last suggestion from CISA in regards to these types of attacks, do not use a VPN.
That's super interesting.
Super
But you
interesting.
Relates to one of my other stories about the
only
faux SSL VPNs, right?
only use encrypted comms, but don't use encrypted comms.
Well, so when you start reading into
Wow.
this, right? So what I think what they're trying to say is don't use commercial VPNs, right? Especially the free ones, right?
Right.
Or the cheap ones or whatever. Like, and I don't have any, I can't point the finger at anybody, but truly, that saying, like, if it's free, then you're what's being sold.
You're the product,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
But we're talking about what they're referring to, Bill, is the VPNs that you put an app on your phone, as an example, and it creates a tunnel to some server up in the cloud, and then you browse the web through that,
Yeah.
right?
Or in some of the cases, like you see, like you want to watch shows that are only available to
Right.
the BBC on the BBC, but you can't watch them outside of the
So you
UK
can set your location. Yep.
because the BBC is state funded and it's for British
Yeah.
UK
I
citizens.
hate that we still have to call them VPNs, but we also call them VPNs when we create our own VPNs, so you can VPN
That's
into your
right.
own company, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Because it's a different They're different. I wish we had better terminology
I
for
agree,
that.
but so WireGuard is
Hmm.
free, and it's super easy to set up. You can set it up on a tiny cost nothing server,
Hmm.
Amazon and
Or you
Azure.
can be lazy like me and you can just use Tailscale.
Yeah, does that
I
so?
mean, and they're not a sponsor of the show, but I will say it's another service that I use. It's free for like 5 users and a certain number of devices. I believe it's WireGuard under the covers bill,
Hmm,
which is why I mention it.
mhm.
And you create an account, and it's even easier. I've done the WireGuard thing on a Raspberry Pi where
Yeah.
I created my own thing, and that worked, and that was easy to set up. But it's like even easier. Tailscale's awesome.
So
I love it.
would Tailscale allow you to bypass that the BBC thing that you guys were just discussing, or how does that
Um,
kind of work?
I don't know if you can configure it
Where
that
where
way.
where the quote endpoint
Yeah, if you could
comes out.
configure it to be a gateway, that might be possible. I've never tried to configure it
Hmm,
that way. I
interesting.
basically use it to create VPN connections between the studio and my house, so I can
Yeah,
not expose anything to the internet.
yeah.
Like I'm all just VPN between them.
Well, for take this for what it's worth. I don't have any inside information, but this is a very clear signal coming to that very clear signal that if you're using one of those cheap or free VPNs, hey, go learn, go make your own. Don't use it
Hmm.
anymore. They're they're doing something with your data that they
Yep.
shouldn't do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
CISA also had a thing they put out called Enhanced Visibility and Hardening Guidance for Communications Infrastructure,
Yep.
which I
We
read
we had
and
and we had some comments on that on the show last week, and
okay,
I get to go back and listen to that because that one is also open for public comments.
right.
And as part of some of my day job stuff, that's some of the things that they like me to do is go respond to some of
cool.
these types
Yeah.
of things.
Right. But speaking of the firmware thing, it's in CIS's guidance. They're like, make sure you confirm the integrity of software image in use by using a trusted hashing calculation utility if available. They also say like basically you have to compare the image on your device with the official image from the company. Like so they're basically you need to validate the
When you
firmware
the one you
integrity.
the one
I
you
mean, it's why
download,
we posted a blog about it because I mean that's what what we do at Eclipse.
yeah,
One of the
make
huge
sure the
things
one
we
you
do,
downloaded matches the ones
right?
that's on their website with their published hashes.
Yeah. So interesting. We get guidance from CISA. I wish we had a little
Yeah.
more stick and carrot. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
A little more enforcement on there. I
Yeah,
think their recommendations are great. I mean, they are.
I
But
think what you want to say is that I wish we had a lot more stick and a little less carrot.
yes,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
a little less. Hey, you should do this. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
you do-
sure,
this-
fine.
Yeah. Tell
yeah,
me
But
why.
that's the carrot. You need to do this, or I'm going to beat you with a stick.
hmm
That's what we really need.
yeah, there's no consequences.
Right.
Well, I mean, there are, but I mean, because China's going to hack your shit. But
It's a different
that's
story altogether.
right.
So speaking
Those are
about
the
running your
consequences.
old VPN, your story number 32, Paul.
Yeah,
I think we've tried to talk about this before, but we didn't make it there. So
I think so too.
Nacho VPN.
Nacho VPN. I love the name. Nacho VPN.
VPN.
A delicious but malicious SSL VPN server. I haven't like dug into the actual research they presented at Sans Hack Hollywood or something conference. Was where this was presented
Oh yeah,
first.
yeah.
They say we identified flaws in the trust relationship with VPN servers, showing how attackers could exploit these tools to gain privileged access with minimal interaction. Um, so through their testing, basically, they could compromise end user devices in real world enterprise environments, targeting the implicit trust VPN clients place in servers. Attackers can manipulate client behaviors, execute arbitrary commands, and gain high levels of access with minimal effort.
So
I'm sold. I'm sold. Count me in.
this is sick, right? This is
Yeah.
awesome. I love this. And so, I became aware of Nacho VPN because it was in your stories a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
But why, why I don't quite get it, right? So from what I get, and especially given the CISA guidance that we just got, right, is that VPN servers are able to attack the clients as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, this is our proof of concept that a VPN server can attack a VPN client and get it to execute commands. So now we talk about your free, cheap, whatever Probably shady. I'm doing it, for shady reasons to begin with. VPN server. Now we have a proof of concept that shows that if we don't have inherent trust with our VPN provider, they could potentially be attacking our client to get it to run run execution on our device to do to do whatever. So I just think this is excellent research. Super, super cool.
Yeah, and as part of this, they actually released 2 advisories and have 2 CVEs. One against Palo Alto's Global Protect for, remote code execution and privilege escalation, and SonicWall's Net Extender for Windows with RCA as system via the EPC client update mechanism.
I feel
Neat.
like we've talked about the VPN server being evil before.
Yeah, but it was not this good, if I remember.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to get to like a diagram where, because I'm curious, like, how do you convince the client to connect to you?
You don't, right? I mean, this is what would be considered a proof of concept, right? Like, so,
Mhm.
and I don't think that that's necessarily what this tool, would be, other than a proof of concept, but showing that if we did have a malicious VPN server,
Right.
that
Oh, I see.
yeah,
They explain it. So, step 1, become a VPN server. Step 2, convince the target to connect to you. Step 3, tell the VPN client what to do.
Yeah.
right,
So like
Okay.
so
Left as an exercise to the reader
right,
so
of
yeah,
step
g-
2,
go look
convincing the target to connect to your
go
server.
go
Right.
look
Yep.
for those expired domain names
Mhm.
and find ones that may have had quote VPN registered as
Mhm.
a host name.
well, that's brilliant.
And
Yep.
go
Mhm.
buy expired domains and set up a VPN server and
All right, guys,
yeah.
I gotta go. I'm gonna go buy some old domains.
Right?
VPN.example.com.
Right.
Wait, don't we know somebody that owns example.com?
Do we? I don't. I know. Always was curious about example.com. I never looked
Hmm.
I,
into it.
th-
I'm
I
sure there's a
thought the
whole story there.
registrars ended up buying that or something.
Something like that.
Taking it back or something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was one big one that we knew that there was some big domain name that like got used as as an example all over the place and
Mm.
somebody picked it up and the
You know,
research
there's
didn't come.
CVE. Did I talk about that on the show? There's also CVE numbers designated as examples. If we need
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
put
You
example,
talked
there's
about
ones
that. Yeah.
reserved for that
Mhm.
too. Yep.
Hey, welcome back, Lee.
Welcome back, Lee.
Yay!
I think we talked about one of your stories while you were dealing with your internet outage.
Awesome.
We were talking about, what were we talking about? The CISA best practice guides. We talked about
Oh, that
those.
bottom one, about for
Yeah.
mobile. Cool. I was hoping you guys would dig into that because that like follows up. Remember last week we were talking about the Salt Typhoon stuff and they were capturing
Mhm.
the
Yep.
telecoms. My thing was, this is actually decent guidance. We could pick it apart, but hey, it's at least putting some guidance out there about how to use mobile security.
I think CISA's
is-
guidance is sound. I think what we were saying is we need some more consequences in a stick to get people to abide by the guidance.
There. Oh, I was thinking we need a stick to help raise the bar on the telecoms, but yeah, I
I
think
mean, there's that.
Yeah, and it's not just telecoms either. I mean,
Yeah.
the typhoons have targeted a lot of different organizations. So, I thought we talked about another one of your stories. I did want to talk about German sinkholes botnet of 30,000
that was
bad
actually
boxes.
one I was hoping you wanted to talk about.
Yeah,
So
'cause I like it when we take down botnets. It sounds like
no, I think it's awesome.
Germany's
And
done
what
that.
this was Android-based, older Android version-based IoT devices like picture frames and
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
other stuff that basically came out of the
Maybe
box.
I start
Supply
seeing
chain
it.
compromise, come out of the box with the malware in it.
Oh, I know. I
Oh,
wrote about bad box. Yeah.
yeah.
Now
Yeah,
that
and so
you say that in context, I
yeah,
was like,
in
oh yeah.
Germany they had all their ISPs get together and sinkhole the IPs that these things are trying to talk to, which is really cool. I mean, think about the coordination, and I'm actually having to do it. I'm sure nobody pushed back or was hesitant to do it. Yeah, but still cool they pulled it off. So then I was like, how do you figure out if your Android is like certified and running a cool version or not? I mean, and it turns out that if you've got the Google Play app, you can ask it and there's instruction. I put a link into the support article to see if it's certified or not, which should tell you at least then it's not going to let you. It's going to try and help you not run bad apps. I mean, nothing's perfect, right? But at least you could check and see where you are. So that's the bottom link in my comment there that goes to the.
So
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So I just looked up my Android TV devices pre-owned supply chain security threats blog,
Mhm.
and I have in October 2023, Human Security releases a research report. They dubbed them. I don't know if they dubbed it or someone called it Bad Box,
Uh-huh.
which was running on Android TV devices that were coming pre-owned.
Yeah.
That we talked about.
I think you need to publish an update to this article
Yeah.
because you're missing it.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Lee,
there
just
for
looking
Peach
at
Pit.
your the
Oh, yeah, I
link
am.
to check your devices, it looks like you open the Google Play Store app. At the top right, tap on your profile icon, tap settings, and then tap about to see if you are Play Protect certified is what
Yeah.
you're looking for.
Do one of y'all have an Android to see if that's actually fact, not fiction?
Paul?
That is Android. Is that Android TV specific?
No, I
What
think
was
it's
it
any
again?
Android.
Yeah.
Right, he's pulling
I
his
mean-
Android device out.
Well, I mean, this is a Pixel, so yeah,
Said
it
Android
is.
I mean, it should be.
I can tell you,
I mean,
it is.
It should say I'm
Google Play
certified. I'm
protected.
happy.
So where do you get to it?
Play Store app, the Google Play Store app, top
Okay,
right, tap your
stand by.
profile icon,
Stand by. Yep.
Yep.
then settings, and then about.
And what are we looking for?
Play protection certification. Device
you
is
go.
certified. Yeah.
Hey.
Which
I was
makes
hoping
sense,
it
'cause
was
the
a general
apps-
answer
yeah.
for any Android.
So
Because
what?
the apps that they're putting on these Android devices, which sometimes are phones, but oftentimes other devices like TVs, the apps would never pass Play Store protection,
Right.
because their automated analysis would go, "What do you mean you're creating, sending traffic to China or whatever, sending all your
Yeah.
passwords to China?"
Yep.
Right?
So what do
So
you
they're
do?
Why are you
So they're
taking a network
sideloading them
scan
from
and dumping it to where?
Mhm.
What do you do if your picture frame is not Play Store certified, Play
Well,
Protect certified?
You hope
It's-
that you can root it and remove the apps and malware
or you
from it.
only upload pictures that you want them to see, like
Mhm.
Goatsy.
Mhm.
Well, and in fact, one of the interesting things, this isn't universally true. A lot of the routers come with a guest network, and the guest
Yep.
network, they force, for consumer ones, they force the device isolation setting. So it's not a panacea. Well, it's a panacea. It's not perfect, but then you could put it there where at least it can't get to anything else. It can
Yeah.
only talk, can only send its badness out.
Yeah, I want to say some of it, like send your Wi-Fi password to China
Yeah,
in your
well,
SSID.
Or the,
I'd
or
rather
the
send my
credentials, or the
guest network
credentials you're using to
password.
sign into YouTube. And
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's doing all
But
kinds of nasty
better.
stuff.
I actually, the conclusion I came away with is on that stuff, because it's in the firmware. I mean,
Yeah.
Larry, Paul, I know you could probably go fix that firmware, but
If you could root the device.
right, but
is
the
my-
random
that's my
user,
issue.
they got to go buy another one, and they,
Right.
And I'm sorry, that's kind of cruel.
They're going to go buy another one, and they're going to buy another cheap
I know,
$20
right? Yeah.
$20
Yeah.
streaming device, which has got
Yep.
the same problem.
They're going to buy the one that
Correct.
comes with the free Ginsu knives. Of course they are. I would
Yeah.
rather
Ask-
they
a-
bought one that's certified. Maybe they'll learn. My
Yeah,
hope was
ask
that
us-
somebody would
ask
buy
us how we
one
know
that was
this, right, Paul?
certified.
Yeah, some of the ones I saw, you can remove the malware if you can root the device
Yeah,
with
yeah, right.
ADB. You can get on there and you can just.
Yeah.
People have published guides like, here's how you rip the
Right.
malware out. The problem is, like, newer devices, a lot of them are like, you can't root them,
Right.
or I mean, like, it's super hard to root them,
Yeah.
or someone
Oh,
hasn't figured it out.
Or on the other occasions, like, how is your sister going to go do this?
You're right.
I was going to say, that's not going to happen on the device that you sent to grandma in her retirement home.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know what?
Just let Grandma be hacked and happy.
There was talk of certain like AV EDR vendors support Android, largely for the phone market, I believe.
Yeah,
and
you
I was
could-
speculating. I think even read some forum posts about like, hey, it'd be really cool if I could put that on my Android TV device, and then that app could kind of help do that. I think your mileage varies based on the Android device, but there
Right,
are
and the OS
basically it's
and
AV
whether that app
for
is
your Android.
available. But
Yep.
I mean, I'd be clicking and see if I could find and install it. I mean,
Right.
Mm.
Well, it's often then you gotta, how do you load it on there, and then it gets
Right.
into our story about the dude that did the point of sale or device or whatever, right? And was trying to root it, and how do you get to a settings, and how do you get to a browser, and you got to unlock it, kind of thing. They basically don't want you messing with that stuff, which is
No, of
frustrating.
course not.
No.
They want it. It's really intended to be a set it and forget it. Can set the internet settings, log into your services, but pretty much it's
Well, they will oftentimes lock you out so that they can run an app like Netflix.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. So a lot of the major apps won't run on a device that can be rooted. There's actually an Android attestation framework. So the app can hit this API from Google and help attest the security level of the device. If it doesn't meet a certain standard, Netflix won't run.
Well,
And
that's
the
kind of
only
cool.
reason they do that is for piracy. They
Well,
want to protect the content on their network, so they're going to protect the app.
I mean, we could argue about whether their motivation matters, but you know what? Making sure your device is cool before your app will run, there's something to that.
It's pretty slick,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they're not doing it for the best of reasons, but
No, but doing it at all, I mean, how many apps don't even check?
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like I said, I had another story that I thought was kind of weird, and I wanted to mention it just real quick, and that was that credit union story, my number 2. And there were 2 things. I mean, they were got by the what was it? I forget what was it? Nitrogen ransomware group.
Yep.
And the 2 things that popped out on me on this one was not so much that they were hacked by the Nitrogen group, which real bummer, and they're working out to do credit restoration, all that stuff for their members. I'm cool. But what surprised me is, one, the credit union, which is a $1.7 billion credit union with 300,000 members, is a pretty sized credit union, didn't have a member facing site that said, hey, we had the incident, here's what's going on, here's what's wrong, here's what you need to do. It's like, isn't that like table stakes in 2024?
You'd think so.
Especially for a credit union.
And then the weird slimy thing is there's already a lawsuit firm spinning up a class action investigation to see if they can get a class action going against these guys. I'm like,
Of course they are.
this isn't even cold yet, and they're already, the sharks are circling. That
Yep.
really bugged me. I mean, I may be naive, but damn it, come on.
The other one that I think seems really weird, and the credit union is saying that now personal information belonging to more than 240,000 people, and Lee, how much did you say credit million was? 1 point something?
1.7 billion.
1.7 billion. That Nitrogen ransomware gang says that they exfiltered 650 gigabytes of customer data.
Yeah. That seems like more than
What?
240,000, doesn't it?
What? Like, if you think about exfiltrating all of my transactions since the beginning of time and multiplying that across 240,000 users, like, there's no way that's 650 gigs of data. That's text.
Yeah.
Like,
Text is small.
yeah.
So they probably got a bunch of other crap. I mean,
Yeah.
I suspect they like just owned a server, and what they got was 650 gigs.
Yeah, they get backups of backups,
And which it still sucks for the credit union, but
Totally.
yeah, that'd be
Totally.
So,
Would
by
you
the way,
please?
I
Would-
keep telling people, if you watch my comments and saying, it's like, if you don't already have your own credit protection stuff in place, freaking do it. Don't wait to find out you're in a breach.
Yeah. What is this story,
Because
Paul?
it's crazy.
Yeah. I bring this next one up just for Bill because I know how much he loves Tesla.
Sure.
Which story is this now?
My story number 2, the 0 Day Initiative posted a teardown of their wall charger.
Cool.
Ooh.
Now, when I had my wall charger installed, don't install it yourself. You need an electrician to install it. Don't. Like, I had a certified electrician come to the house, install the wall charger, and then he was like, "So here's the manual. It's all wired up right. Like, it's on you now." And I'm like, I had to connect it to my Wi-Fi network. I'm like, what? It has a web interface on it, and I'm like, oh, this is really just like an IoT system. I'm like, I really should tear this thing apart, but I'm like, also it's my charger that I don't want to mess up.
And it was very expensive, right?
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
Because now you have to buy the device. I forget how much the device costs, but it's roughly depending on your electrician, around $1,000, parts and labor to have it installed in your home.
Mhm.
So I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to mess with it. And then I saw ZDI's running opponent-owned competition, and one of these is in scope. And what they
Cool.
posted was a complete hardware analysis and firmware extraction, with a promise of, in the summary, excited to see what research is displayed in Tokyo during the Pwn-to-Own automotive event. So this device apparently is included in the contest.
Well, I hope
So hopefully they find some bugs and they fix them.
Well, and
Because so
hopefully
my chargers.
they also throw in all the other ones and don't just pick on Tesla, right? I mean,
Oh
like,
no, So let's see. This is a link to all the devices. Tesla is on the list. In-vehicle
Wait, is this
entertainment
last year?
systems.
Is this last year's though? Yeah, this is last year.
Okay, so this is last year's in scope. So I guess we'll find out what'll be in scope for this year.
But
It is more than just Tesla.
But given what their track record is, what have they have? They've got Tesla stuff, infotainment, ECUs, autopilot.
So Tesla sponsors the event and purposely puts the gear in scope so that people
cool.
test
Well, then
it.
good on
Yeah.
Tesla. So like
Right.
as somebody that's just, is a new EV owner, what I see is there is hundreds of different kinds of chargers that go out,
Yes.
that are available. And and the price ranges are all over the place, and you can get those
Oh.
bottom dollar ones that I imagine are a train wreck, right? So
Oh, for in your house,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Because
And-
so you can put any kind of charger in your house.
mhm.
I mean, if
I
you, and if
gotcha.
you look at the prize amounts Tesla's
maybe this isn't.
offering, holy crud!
Yeah.
I mean, if you got full remote on their autopilot, you can get 400 grand. Or if you get Root,
Wow.
500. I mean,
Root
they're
on
putting some
their
serious
gateway via
incentive to go find
diagnostic
stuff.
infotainment Ethernet.
I'm
Mhm.
curious though, like if vulnerabilities are disclosed and they get fixed, how do I get the fixes to my charger? Is it auto updating firmware?
And connected
In
to
the
Wi-Fi,
background?
That
right?
would be consistent
Yeah.
with their
cars.
SOP, but I'd want to ask, not assume.
Right. Because on the car, you have to approve and schedule the update.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
does.
So-
I don't think there's any kind of automatic, because your car is not drivable for around 30 minutes every time you apply
Well,
an
maybe
update.
you get like a notification in your app or something like,
But for my charger, I've never seen an app to update software. I've seen it for the car,
Mm.
obviously, like it tells me all the time because you can click a box like I want updates faster than everyone else. I forget what the Tesla calls that, but like I check that box so I get the updates because I want to live dangerously. And it's pretty regular updates that you get. But I've never seen like a notification for my charger. It's weird.
So I had a conversation a few weeks ago about the fact they were talking about that you could set up your home system such that you could not only charge your Tesla but use it as a battery for like a power outage and stuff.
Yep.
And this was overcast by a rumor that a state was looking to fix their grid deficiencies by tapping off everybody's EV battery as they were trying to charge. So the question relative to the article is that a software setting that a bug could possibly trip, or is that actually a hardware configuration? Because I'm
That's a
thinking
good
if that was
question.
software, holy crap.
Well, so is
Uh,
that, first of all, is that true, Paul? Can you use your Tesla to power other things? Because I thought that I know
not
that,
to my knowledge.
so I know that I think the Fords can do it.
Yeah, the model, the 150 that's in EV can
Is
they
it the
advertise it, you
Subaru
can
ad
do it.
that has them doing it?
Well, so I
Those-
think that there are specific models that can do that, but I do think that actually, man, I don't know. I've never done it.
Well, if
So,
it's specific to the model, in other words, it's really a hardware configuration in the vehicle, that's cool. I mean, I'm not cool about somebody trying to tap that centrally, but
Yeah.
Right.
but
Yeah, is it in the Tesla hardware that current only flows one way?
Mhm.
which is fine.
Right.
By the way,
I'm not sure.
it was, but that
can find out.
part of it was, you instead of buying a Powerwall, use your Tesla, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But
It wouldn't
I'd
shock
want a
me if
Powerwall as a Powerwall because maybe the car's not home.
it wouldn't shock me if Tesla had it as a software thing. That
Yeah.
current can flow both ways, but they just configure it right now so that it doesn't in anticipation of doing that.
Well, you know how I feel about Tesla, but I will tell you, good on them, man. Like, and I hope some bugs are found and squashed. Like, so
Yep.
that's
me
good.
Oh
too.
yeah, and then I hope that they can update the charging system just like they would a car. I mean, hell, it's online.
Yeah. Cool.
Hey, if you
Well,
ever run
that
into
will
somebody delivering or
go ahead.
installing something in your house, and you say something like, "I'd really rather that wasn't online," and they look like you're from Mars.
Right. Yeah, because they're just right. No one asked them that
Yeah.
before.
I've had that a few times with certain stuff. It's like, really? You didn't think about? Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Well, I think that will conclude the show. We're going to go on holiday break. So happy holidays to everyone. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. Larry, take us out.
Happy holidays to whatever you celebrate. Festivus for the rest of us, or anything else for that matter, but over and.